DC's secret Marvel advisor, Batman's teacher breaks the multiverse. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 61, Early Winter Routine. I think there might be a bit of a misunderstanding. Natasha's voice came through the telephone on the other end. No need to explain. Besides, SHIELD actually provides health insurance for family members. I've mentioned before, our benefits are quite generous. I didn't. Wait a minute, are you saying there's money involved? Nick's reporting 30% of the amount? That's so high. Captain America's bonus is only 18%. Oh, yes, indeed. Thank you for your consolation. She's doing all right. Natasha continued on the telephone. I heard that Stark wants to hire some neuroscientists for further modifications to his mech armor. I hope you can remind him that even though Colonel Rhodes has resigned from his position, the military won't give up. Even without the Air Force, there's still the Army and Navy. This trouble is far from over. Schiller replied, I understand. I believe Stark can handle these matters on his own now. In fact, Schiller was right. Stark had to handle these matters on his own, and what made it even more troublesome was that he now had to learn to take care of himself. Previously, Obadiah had been in charge of most of Stark's weapon manufacturing department and military industry department. But now, Obadiah was incapacitated due to serious injuries and advanced age, and he remained unconscious. Pepper was overwhelmed, wishing she could split into 8 people to handle everything. Originally, Pepper was just Stark's personal secretary. Even if she helped him manage the company, it was mainly for HR and procurement matters. However, with Obadiah out of commission, Pepper had taken over the entire Stark Industries. She no longer had time to manage Stark's personal life. It was widely known that Stark had virtually no self-sufficiency in his personal life. He used to have his good friend Rhodes to stay with, but now Rhodes was on vacation. Even though Jarvis was highly intelligent, he was still just an electronic life form and couldn't take care of Stark in every aspect. Schiller and Stark stood on either side of the clinic's door, staring at each other. Stark knocked on the door and said, "Let me in." "It's still daytime. Don't you open the door at this time?" "You didn't have an appointment, so of course not." "Damn it, why can they all come and go as they please, but not me?" "As you said, they can come and go anytime. How long do you plan to stay here?" "Don't tell me it's a month." "Well, not that long, it depends on how busy Pepper gets. I guess with her intelligence, she can take over Stark Industries in about 3 weeks. 3 weeks? I suggest you turn left to SHIELD. Hey, you know I don't want to go there. There are 2 of Howard's old war buddies there." Stark bent 2 fingers to make air quotes. "Having tea meetings every day, reminiscing about their World War II days, I can't stand that." As he spoke, Stark tried to push the door to enter, but Schiller pressed against it with his hand. He said, "Listen, I'm deeply touched that you stayed up all night studying neurology materials for me, but that doesn't mean you can stay here for a month. That spider kid can stay, why can't I?" Schiller took a deep breath and hesitated for a moment. Stark outside the door stared at him. He wasn't wearing his mech armor, and the wind outside was strong, so he was struggling to keep his scarf in place. Well, he did look a bit pitiful. Schiller hesitated for a moment, but what he regretted even more was still to come. Iron Man was indeed a very loyal friend. If he appeared in front of you only once a month, you would think he was the best friend in the world, smart, wealthy, and loyal. But when he showed up in front of you every day within a month, you would only see him as a pile of dog poop. Stark was the epitome of best observed from afar. Soon, Schiller understood why Rhodes had swiftly packed his bags and left for a vacation in Antarctica. He must have foreseen the current situation. The next morning, Schiller hadn't even gotten out of bed when he heard noise downstairs. Stark, with his mouth wide open, tiptoed around the refrigerator. However, when he turned around, the cuff of his sweater brushed against the edge of the dining table. He muttered under his breath and pulled his sleeve up with 2 fingers, then quickly ran upstairs to change his clothes. When he came back down, he kept complaining, "Damn it, I feel like the air here is filled with the smell of oil. Why can't you clean this place properly? My God, the dust on the armrest must have been there for 10 years, and those picture frames are just breeding grounds for bacteria. Oh, the kettle, and this kettle too. Do you know that the steam it emits may carry various bacteria harmful to the respiratory tract? Damn it, stay away. You rat, I'm allergic to fur, go away. Has it been vaccinated? Does it carry any plague?" Stark exclaimed, seemingly to himself. After finishing breakfast, Stark lounged on the sofa in the living room. He spoke into the telephone, saying, "Oh, yes, sweetheart, I've been quite busy lately. Magazine cover? Well, you'll have to ask that bald editor, you know, I'm busy with Hollywood too. Or Livy? No, she's not as beautiful as you, of course. I guess no one at that big fashion show could be sexier than you. Schiller, who was writing his thesis by the window, couldn't tolerate it any longer and smacked Stark on the back of his head with a ballpoint pen. Stark let out a surprised ouch and turned to look at Schiller. After a while, Peter arrived, and the two of them started playing games together. When these two met, it truly demonstrated the meaning of staying up all night and sleeping in the morning. Stark's schedule in the laboratory was basically reversed, starting experiments around 6 or 7 in the evening, continuing until 8 or 9 in the morning. According to him, nighttime was when his inspiration was at its peak. Peter used to stay up late frequently, but due to home renovations, he stayed with Schiller for a while. Schiller had a healthy routine, going to bed and waking up early. To avoid inconveniencing Dr. Schiller, Peter adjusted his schedule as well, now going to sleep around midnight. Pikachu, being a yellow-furred rat, was actually a nocturnal creature, most active between 3 and 4 in the morning. So, when Stark arrived, the 3.5 residents in the house lived according to different biological clocks. The conflicting sleep schedules turned the whole house into chaos. When Schiller was getting ready for bed, Stark was just waking up. While Stark and Peter were engrossed in gaming, Peter would become drowsy. And when Stark and Pikachu were battling into the morning, ready to sleep in exhaustion, Schiller would already be awake. Not to mention the two superheroes flying around aimlessly over New York. Iron Man typically saved the world during the daytime, sacrificing his daytime sleep. So, occasionally, he would jump out of bed like a zombie around 10 or 11 in the morning to save the world, almost causing Pikachu to urinate in Stark's cup. Good neighbor Spider-Man liked to go out at night, also sacrificing his nighttime sleep. Typically, he would leave or return when Schiller was sound asleep. For this reason, Peter was often hit on the back of his head by flying ballpoint pens and teacups. Steve and Stark, who occasionally dropped by, had irreconcilable conflicts. Every time Steve went for his morning run, Stark was still awake, and the tired Iron Man couldn't outwit Captain America. This infuriated Stark so much that he stayed awake, donned his iron combat suit, and challenged Steve to a duel. When the two finished their duel, it was usually around noon. Correct, Peter, who had stayed up half the night, would then wake up. Natasha stood at the clinic's entrance, extremely puzzled, and asked Schiller, apart from your pets, there should be 3 people living here, but why do I always see only one of them? My colleagues in the statistics department have given up on providing you with their schedules. Every time I come here looking for someone, it's like playing a lottery. Schiller was also annoyed, saying, this is my house, so naturally, their schedules revolve around mine. Besides, my routine is the healthiest, I go to bed at 8 in the evening and wake up at 5 in the morning. Is there a more regular schedule than that? Stark also defended his schedule, saying, no great scientist would work without staying up all night. Nighttime is when God has given humans the best time to unleash their genius. Come on, my inventions made at night can change the world. Why should I adjust? Peter complained as well, who goes to bed at 9 o'clock nowadays? My classmates are all the same, and there are too many great games coming out recently. Why should I stay up? You should ask those game developers why they release all the fun games in the same month. Pikachu had the most reasonable argument, I'm just a mouse. Do you really expect a mouse to adjust its schedule like a human? Even the symbiote felt aggrieved and said in Schiller's mind, their brains always smell particularly delicious in the middle of the night. Finally, one night, Schiller was awakened in the early hours, and the symbiote was desperately salivating in his mind. Stark burst into the room excitedly, shouting, I know what's going on. Come and see. How do you like this structure? As a nanoneuron in the neural network. I'm a genius. This will definitely work. The next morning, Pepper found Stark outside the psychological clinic's door, bewildered and thrown out with his luggage. Episode 62, Early Winter Daily Life, 2. As human beings, inherently social creatures, we often exhibit a propensity for conformity. When placed within a particular group or environment, it becomes challenging to remain unaffected by that setting. Stark now had first-hand experience with this phenomenon. Peter's days were filled with sweet moments spent with his childhood sweetheart, Gwen. After Gwen and Peter had officially established their relationship not too long ago, they began dating at a frequency of 2 or 3 times a week. Spider-Man, who had not yet progressed to the stage of meeting his future father-in-law, was currently bubbling over with happiness. Every day, he enthusiastically discussed the small gifts from his girlfriend or raved about the delicious dishes at the restaurants they visited. Stark had to acknowledge that despite Peter's seemingly juvenile details and their choice of dining establishments that Stark, a billionaire, would never consider, he could sense Peter's genuine joy in every word. Apart from Peter, thanks to the talkative scarecrow, Schiller and his wife's story had grown richer and sadder after passing through many retellings. Originally just information Coulson had gathered during a routine investigation of Strange, this piece of juicy gossip was not something he could keep to himself. The next day, Natasha and Nick heard a remarkably detailed and authentic version of the story from Coulson. Coulson, a genius agent, had expanded Strange's brief statements into a full-fledged narrative. As this story made its way to Natasha and Nick's ears, Natasha, with her sensibility unique to women, was particularly interested in this romantic love story. She added her own imaginative romantic details, making it feel even more real. Nick, however, was a skeptic, and upon learning of this, he naturally wanted to investigate. His investigation eventually led him to some intriguing leads. He discovered that the large sum of money Shield and Stark had paid Schiller had initially been deposited into a U.S. account, but recently, this substantial amount had been transferred to an international account in Switzerland. The trail of the money then disappeared, and Nick speculated that Schiller might be using his magic abilities to visit his wife. Nick always believed that being a good agent required not only meticulous logical thinking but also the ability to think outside the box. Many times, an unexpected insight could lead to unexpected changes in action. All these factors combined led Nick to believe that there was a high probability of truth in this matter. He suspected that Schiller's wife might not be a U.S. citizen, as there was no record of such a woman disappearing in the archives. Schiller might have met her while traveling, and after falling in love and getting married, she might have developed a debilitating illness that was temporarily incurable but continually worsening. Combining this with Schiller's mention of low-temperature technology earlier, Nick speculated that Schiller might possess a technique that could freeze a person, preserving his wife's condition and preventing it from deteriorating while he continued searching for a treatment. Nick saw more than just a tragic love story in this narrative. He wanted to recruit Schiller fully into S.H.I.E.L.D., believing that if S.H.I.E.L.D. could make progress in treating his wife, they would gain a powerful ally. Therefore, Nick started gathering materials from various neurology experts, intending to find someone qualified to deal with this issue. If Schiller ever heard Nick's thoughts or learned about the story he had woven in his mind, he would surely applaud the agent of the S.H.I.E.L.D. After all, wasn't this the love story of Freeze Victor and his wife? And so, the story of Freeze was in Nick's hands for the taking. When this story reached Stark's ears, he naturally assumed that Nick must have concrete evidence, leading him to believe that Schiller had indeed been striving for years to find a treatment for his wife. This revelation was quite a shock to Stark. After all, he had spent most of his formative years on the road, surrounded by individuals who were, in essence, just as hedonistic as his father. The more devastating blow, however, came from Captain America, Steve. A few days ago, Stark noticed that Steve had stopped his early morning runs. Concerned, Stark approached Schiller to inquire about Steve's condition, and Schiller informed him that Steve had been in low spirits lately. Stark was delighted. If Captain America was feeling down, Iron Man's spirits could only soar. However, when Steve returned, he appeared incredibly worn out, and Schiller also seemed solemn and sorrowful. Peter, for the most part, kept a low profile. During these days without Pepper, Stark had been wandering aimlessly, and he had finally started picking up on social cues. Seeing everyone's somber demeanor, he decided to hold back his words. Later, he went to Schiller again to ask about what was bothering Steve. However, Schiller simply shook his head and told Stark to ask Steve himself. How could Iron Man willingly approach Captain America? But Stark's overpowering curiosity eventually led him to seek out Steve. And that's when he learned about the century-spanning romantic love story between Steve and Peggy. As a newly enlisted soldier, Steve, frail and helpless, encountered a commanding female officer who was both impressive and attentive. Afterward, as this new recruit rose to become the renowned Captain America, they faced life and death together, becoming each other's perfect soulmates. Even after a century had passed, Steve remained unwavering in his belief that Peggy was his perfect dance partner. However, the ending of this romantic tale was heart-wrenching. A few days ago, Steve had visited the aging Peggy, lying in a sickbed, and learned from the doctor that her time was running out. He saw the photo that Peggy had kept. It wasn't the strong Captain America after the serum injection, but the timid and bullied Steve who had just entered the boot camp. After his transformation into Captain America, Steve hadn't cried like that in a long time. He was on the verge of breaking down, even irrationally rushing to Nick's office, asking if there was any special serum that could save Peggy. Unfortunately, in the end, Steve could only accept this painful and helpless outcome. This story had a profound impact on Stark because in Steve's words, his father Howard had been a part of this entire story, and he and Peggy had been friends. This made Stark ponder, wondering if he was a bit too different. When it came to women, Stark was never short of options. From magazine models to party girls and Hollywood actresses, Stark changed companions daily, sometimes even multiple times a day. But when it came to love, genuine love, Stark realized he had nothing to show for it that would resonate with his friends. First love? He vaguely remembered something, but Stark had to acknowledge that he had forgotten most of it. Peter and Gwen were in love, Schiller and his wife experienced life and death together, Captain America and Peggy, their love story never unfolded. And then there was Stark, surrounded by these people, who couldn't help but use his brilliant mind to ponder why he was so different. Lately, Pepper's been giving me some strange looks. Stark, Schiller, and Peter sat at a table in the S.H.I.E.L.D. cafeteria. After Schiller kicked Stark out, Pepper had no choice but to place him in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s care, which Stark wasn't thrilled about. But if he didn't go there, he'd be sleeping on the streets. Strange? What kind of strange? I'm not joking, I'm serious. Her eye contact, I can't quite put my finger on it. It's a mix of worry, relief, and a hint of sympathy. I should let you handle my profession, you can read so much from eye contact. Stark waved his hand dismissively. Come on, I've encountered 1,000, if not 800, women in my life. I can tell exactly what's on their minds from their eye contact. So, what's going on with Pepper? It depends on what's been going on with you lately. Do you have anything on your mind? What's there to worry about? I'm doing great. Schiller put down his fork and snapped his fingers. Jarvis, can you analyze any recent changes in your owner's behavior? Jarvis chimed twice, and Stark rested his face on his hands, waiting for his intelligent butler's response. According to the analysis, you've turned down 18 invitations from the opposite sex in the past week. That's the only noticeable deviation from your usual behavior. In that moment, Stark saw an expression on Schiller's face almost identical to Pepper's. Damn it, I'm not. You don't have to explain. Well, if you've come to terms with it, congratulations. If you're struggling. Schiller shrugged. Then you brought it on yourself. Schiller knew that in comics, Stark was quite the ladies' man. Putting aside his first love, the doomed Meredith, and the treacherous Bane, he had dallied with Gamora, the amazing Captain, Wasp, Spider-Woman, She-Hulk, and countless others. I'm not. Stark put down his utensils and leaned on the table. I just think they aren't that great. Who was it that couldn't stop talking about the beauties on his yacht back then? Okay. Stark, like a deflated balloon, admitted, I've never had a decent love affair. You guys are always in my ear, talking about love and romantic stories. I thought they were everything, sexy, charming, short-lived but passionate. What's not to like? But Peter said yesterday that his girlfriend enjoys hearing about how he creates those machines. They spent an entire afternoon discussing that topic. And they didn't get tired of it. The next day, we went to the exhibition hall, the one belonging to Stark Industries. The machines there were amazing, and we spent the whole day without getting bored. As Stark gave Peter a piercing look, Peter silently stuffed his mouth with a sandwich. Well, no one has ever wanted to hear me talk about these things. They'd rather hear about Hollywood gossip, fashion show scandals, and what's new in winter and spring clothing. Who would willingly listen to me talk about how to build mech armor? But you do want to talk about these things, right? In your eyes, mech armor is much more attractive than those designer coats. Stark pouted, now resembling a sour lemon. But you won't get anywhere by telling us. You should talk to Pepper. But she doesn't know anything about mech armor, and she's already busy. Like I said, as long as you talk to her, she'll definitely be willing to listen. Episode 63, The Art of Making Friends, Little Spider's Skill. In a small coffee shop adjacent to Store Street in the downtown area, Gwen sat across from Peter, slowly stirring her coffee with a spoon. She asked, have you already received your internship driving license? Does that mean we can soon take my dad's car to the beach? Peter replied, my uncle doesn't have much time. He recently had a shadow in his lungs, detected during a hospital visit. Fortunately, it's just a minor inflammation. You know, he used to smoke cigarettes when he was young. Gwen nodded sympathetically, saying, of course, it seems like everyone from their generation was like that. Whenever my dad's coat smelled like cigarettes, my mom would argue with him. Peter shrugged and continued, even though I have the internship driving license, my uncle doesn't have time, and I can't drive alone. I haven't even driven a car yet. I'm not really confident in my driving skills either. The internship driving license only requires a written test. Right now, I can barely start a car, let alone drive it, Peter added, shaking his head. I don't even know when I'll be able to pass the road test. I haven't had many opportunities to ride in a car, let alone drive one. The Parker household only had an old pickup truck that Peter's uncle used for commuting to work. When Peter interned at Stark Company, he used his spider web to swing between high-rise buildings. In the US, at Peter's age, most people only obtained an internship driving license, which required passing a written test. To drive alone on the road, one needed to pass a road test. Peter had barely touched a car, and no matter how much of a genius he was, he couldn't magically acquire driving skills. Passing the road test seemed like a distant dream. Sensing Peter's disappointment, Gwen changed the subject, asking, "I heard Stark Industries offered you a substantial internship stipend. Are they considering hiring you for their group in the future?" Peter replied, "Yes, although I told my uncle and aunt that they would be responsible for my future college tuition, it seems they are frightened by the high cost of some good universities. They want to save all their money in case of any unexpected situations." "Well, sometimes I think they're being overly cautious, but when certain disasters really strike, I realize their worries aren't unfounded," Gwen remarked. Her kindness and understanding always made Peter feel like he didn't quite measure up to her. "If your uncle can't accompany you for driving practice, does he have any friends, or do you have other available relatives?" Gwen inquired. Peter pondered for a moment before replying, "You've reminded me, I do have a few options." The next day, in the living room of the psychological clinic, Peter explained, "So, the situation is that I need to get some hands-on experience with a car before I can pass the road test." Schiller paused for a moment, thinking it didn't sound like a big deal. With Peter's genius level, he could probably learn everything in no time if he took a quick drive together. He said, "No problem, I'd be happy to help. I'll drive first, and you can observe. Then, you can take the wheel yourself. It won't take the whole afternoon, you'll learn everything." After a few dozen minutes, Schiller was behind the wheel, flipping open a small handbook he'd found from somewhere. While adjusting the steering wheel, he read aloud, "Let me see, it's about turning and merging. Oh, here it is. Wait, this rule seems quite bizarre, doesn't it?" Pikachu and Peter sat in the passenger seats, exchanging surprised glances. Pikachu commented, "I guess he never read the New York driver's handbook before taking his driving license test." "Well, that's pretty obvious," Peter replied. "Why don't you think about how he managed to pass the driving test?" Pikachu asked. Peter stared ahead stiffly and replied, "As long as I don't think about that, I'll feel temporarily safe." A few minutes later, Peter and Schiller were standing by the car, shivering in the cold wind of early winter in New York. Schiller held his phone and said, "Hello? Is this the insurance company?" "Yes. I've sent you the location details." "Oh, it's not severe, just a scrape on the side of the vehicle." He then covered the phone and loudly scolded the owner of a white Audi parked nearby, "Shut up. It's all your fault. Haven't you ever read the New York driver's handbook? I was going straight, and you can't." 20 minutes later, a flashy red supercar pulled up beside the accident scene. Stark, wearing sunglasses, waved to Peter and said, "Let's go. Your Uncle Tony will take you to experience the scenic New York coastline." He added with a mocking tone, "You should have come to me in the first place. Look at this doctor. Does he look like a real race car driver? I bet he's never driven a car at 100 miles per hour in his life." Peter glanced back at Schiller, who was still on the phone with the insurance company, and then he climbed into Stark's sports car. Not long after, Pikachu tightly covered his ears in the howling wind and yelled at Peter, "Why? Racing? Without a roof up?" Peter shouted back, "How was I supposed to know?" Stark joined in, shouting, "This is called Fast and Furious. Got it?" A few minutes later, the sports car came to a stop by the side of the road. Stark somehow produced a small booklet from somewhere and muttered as he read, "Damn. How do you close the convertible roof? I've hardly ever driven manually myself. No, Jarvis, I don't need your help. Let me see. Ah, here it is. What? Vehicle Intelligent Management System? Why is it always so darn intelligent? Can't I just drive manually? Is there no button or something for that?" 20 minutes later, Steve picked up Peter on the roadside, whose hair was a tangled mess due to the wind. Pikachu was desperately trying to detangle the hair blown into knots on its body. Peter said, "I should never have believed your nonsense about going for a joyride. I'm just a mouse, I don't need to learn how to drive. Why did I come with you, anyway?" Peter consoled him, saying, "No relationship, Captain America would definitely not be as unreliable as they are." Indeed, Steve arrived in an unremarkable black Cadillac. Once Peter got in, Steve started the car smoothly, at least without pulling out a small booklet to read while driving. Peter breathed a sigh of relief. However, his relief didn't last long. Steve's speed kept increasing, he didn't slow down on turns, and every drift left black tire marks on the ground. Peter was forcefully slammed into the opposite side of the car door with each turn, and Pikachu, nestled in his arms, almost flew out of the car window. Then, as they approached a speed bump, Steve showed no intention of slowing down. In the horrified gaze of Peter and Pikachu, the car plowed straight over it. When the car's front wheels hit the speed bump, it jolted violently, lifting the entire front of the car. Steve paid no attention, and the car almost flew over the speed bump. Peter was thrown from his seat, hitting his head on the roof, and when he came down, his waist was bumped by the seat. He cried out in pain, "Oh! My back!" By this time, Pikachu had been thrown onto the windshield. Still, Steve drove on obliviously. Seeing Peter's sorry state, he chuckled and said, "The suspension system of this car is already very advanced. Back in the day when I drove in combat, my legs and arms would be covered in bruises after just 20 kilometers. Learning to drive always involves this process, doesn't it? Speed bumps on the road are much better than spiked traps and anti-ram roadblocks on the battlefield, right?" 20 minutes later, Coulson arrived in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s specialized car to pick up Steve and Peter. Steve complained, "I take back what I said about this car earlier. Its quality is too poor, why did it stall?" Coulson said, "Captain, even if you're Captain America, you can't drive without a license on the main road in New York and over speed." "Damn driving without a license, how could I not have a driving license? Driving licenses before 1940 don't count." Steve pursed his lips and said, "Fine, but at least I wasn't speeding. Traffic regulations before 1940 don't count either." Pikachu sat in Peter's lap, looking utterly defeated, and said, "You sure know how to make friends." Peter, equally disheartened, replied, "I thought there would be at least one reliable one." "That was just wishful thinking." Coulson turned his head and asked, "So, were you planning to get a driving license? Why didn't you give us a call? S.H.I.E.L.D. can issue you an official driving license directly, bypassing the Department of Motor Vehicles. We still have that authority." Peter said, "If you had told me that before today, I would have been thrilled to have you immediately print me an official driving license. But now I've learned my lesson. I'll practice on my own, memorize the driver's manual and vehicle instructions book before hitting the road, and update my driving license information regularly every year." Coulson seemed quite surprised and looked at Peter with appreciation. "Young people like you, who uphold principles and don't seek privileges, are rare." Peter, exhausted, said, "That's probably because I'm just too good at making friends." Episode 64, Little Spider's Big Adventure, 1. In the end, it was Matt and his girlfriend, Erica, who took on the responsibility of teaching Peter how to drive. Matt's recent severe injury had helped mend the rift between him and Erica, bringing them back together. Of course, once Erica had shaken off the effects of her brainwashing, she realized that her actions had been impulsive. Peter had only been trying to protect Matt. She felt a twinge of remorse for stabbing Peter back then. So, when she learned from Matt about Peter's rather challenging journey in learning to drive, both she and Matt took it upon themselves to help Peter with his driving lessons. It had to be said that Erica was indeed more reliable than the others in this regard. Despite being a ninja assassin, she displayed considerable patience in teaching. On this particular day, Peter was attempting to drive on his own, with Erica and Matt sitting in the car, discussing matters concerning Kingpin. "One day, I'm going to make him pay," Peter declared. "He used such despicable methods against you." "Don't be impulsive," Erica cautioned. "The feud between me and Kingpin is complicated, and he's the most notorious crime lord in the entire country. You're not ready to take him on." "What about Bullseye? I remember he was still in Hell's Kitchen, right?" "I'll go give him a beating tonight," Peter said. Erica replied, "The situation isn't favorable right now. After learning about Dragon Bone, Kingpin hasn't immediately targeted the Hand. It seems they've reached some kind of agreement. Worse yet, Kingpin may have hired the Hand." "That doesn't make sense. If the Hand cares so much about Dragon Bone and knows that Kingpin also wants it, they'll surely turn against him in the end. Doesn't Kingpin know that? That's the worst part. Even if Kingpin knows the Hand won't genuinely cooperate with him and certainly won't hand over Dragon Bone, he's still willing to hire them. This suggests there's something we don't know, something that makes Kingpin take the risk of the Hand turning on him. Does he have any big deals going on recently?" Erica's expression grew serious. "If I have to be honest, you probably already know about it. His drug business." "You mean that plan he abandoned before? What are you two talking about?" Peter controlled the steering wheel, unable to understand the cryptic conversation between Matt and Erica. During this time period, Spider-Man hadn't yet crossed paths with Kingpin. Daredevil Matt was the one primarily battling Kingpin. Kingpin's drug operation on the East Coast has hit a bottleneck. He's already claimed the majority of the market, but he's not satisfied. Earlier, I received intel that Kingpin wants to target younger students, using the network he's built in various colleges and high schools to distribute drugs to even younger children who might become addicted. That way, he hopes to surpass his historical sales figures someday. Peter pounded the steering wheel in frustration and muttered, "Ever since I decided to become a hero, my limits have been constantly tested by people like them. Why do they have no humanity? You'll encounter more monsters like this in the future, Matt said calmly. His calm demeanor gave Peter a sense of strength. As the car turned onto a side street, it was getting late, and Peter decided to take Matt's car back and continue practicing the next day. But just as they made the turn, a blinding light flashed, and Peter instinctively shielded his eyes. Then, his spider sense tingled, and he immediately opened the car door and jumped out. With a loud thud, several throwing darts pierced through the windshield, landing on the driver's and passenger's seats. Peter looked up, and from a nearby high-rise building, several shadowy figures leaped down, accompanied by a cloud of black cigarette smoke. In the blink of an eye, they closed in on the car. After some training, Peter was no longer a complete rookie. He rolled on the ground to avoid a barrage of darts and then leaped, knocking a ninja off the car roof. His strength was considerable, and the ninja turned into a wisp of cigarette smoke and disappeared in an instant. Next, another ninja yanked the car door open, only to find it empty. A cold gleam flashed from a dagger, and Erica appeared by the car's side. She swiftly dealt with one ninja and scared off another with a toss of her throwing darts. Matt wasn't in the car either. His heightened senses allowed him to detect the disturbance while the darts were still in flight. He had taken care of one ninja at the rear of the car and was now approaching, carrying his staff. These guys are really troublesome. Last time, we only got one of them, and this time they've all escaped, Matt said. Peter shook his slightly numb wrist and asked, "What's going on? Have they been attacking you guys recently?" "We moved to a new place, because our old one was constantly plagued by these pests," Erica replied. "I'm sorry, I've been quite busy lately and haven't had a chance to visit you guys. If I had known you were in trouble, I would have come over. It's probably best that you didn't. These people can't be handled with brute force alone. Even Erica and I would need to set traps to take down one of them. In a confrontation like this, they just vanish. You can't deal with Ninja's teleportation technique. You need special methods to counter it," Erica added, holding her dagger as she climbed back into the car. "Should we continue driving? What if they come back? Didn't you notice? They're not here to kill us, just to harass us," Matt explained. Peter also got back in the car. This time Erica took the wheel. Peter asked, "So, what's the point of their actions if they can't harm you?" "We may not fear them, but my neighbors aren't necessarily in the same position. They know that, in order to protect ordinary people, I have to frequently move. This significantly disrupts my ability to go out and combat their industry," Matt explained to Erica. Erica continued after Matt, "This is a common tactic used by the Hand. Whenever someone opposes them, they send these nearly invincible ninjas to harass them continuously until they leave the area for good. These ninjas don't have high combat strength, they don't often kill, and they operate in shadows, leaving no evidence behind. Hence, the authorities in that area rarely have a reason to intervene. This is where Kingpin's brilliance lies. He utilizes these hand ninjas to harass me, ensuring that I temporarily lack the time to hinder his industry upgrades. He knows that even if he goes all out against me, it won't work in the short term. It will only invite more intense retaliation. However, this persistent annoyance, like a swarm of flies, can significantly slow me down." Erica steered the car while saying, "Perhaps this is also one of the reasons he chose to cooperate with the Hand. Your previous actions caused him significant losses. Even though Bullseye nearly succeeded, you resurfaced quickly and dismantled several of his underground casinos. He already knows that, compared to hiring assassins, constantly harassing you is a better choice." Matt sighed, feeling somewhat helpless in his current situation. These ninjas were quite troublesome. They could lower their heart rates, making it difficult for Matt to pinpoint their exact locations. They would visit his home sporadically, either throwing darts or setting fires, causing a lot of chaos. The landlords didn't care if Matt was being harassed, they only wanted to evict him. As a lawyer, Matt had a decent apartment in Manhattan, but his place in Hell's Kitchen was just a stronghold. However, those ninjas always came to disrupt his life, forcing him to move repeatedly, which drained a lot of his energy. Daredevil had only 24 hours in a day, and he used to sacrifice sleep time to combat crime. But now, during the daytime, he had to write complaints, attend court sessions, and pack his belongings for another move. He had only a short window in the late night to patrol. His efficiency had dropped significantly, and he felt drained. Kingpin had successfully exploited Daredevil's weakness. Matt was still a part of society, and when faced with such troubles, he had to spend a lot of time to maintain his societal identity. Erica had her share of troubles too. The Hand didn't show mercy to traitors, and her extended absence had raised Kingpin's suspicions. Bullseye was constantly seeking opportunities to kill her and regain his position. Peter said, "Although I can't help you with these ninjas, I can at least go cause trouble for their leader." "Be careful," Erica warned. "Bullseye is no ordinary person. He's a master acrobat, highly skilled in hand-to-hand combat, and extremely cunning. That's good to know. I haven't faced a worthy opponent in a while. Didn't billionaire Stark provide you with a combat suit? To deal with Bullseye, you should wear it at all times. He's skilled with projectiles, but if his weapons can't penetrate your combat suit, he'll be much easier to handle. The combat suit is still in testing. I received a call from Mr. Stark yesterday. It should be ready in a few days. As the car arrived on the street near Matt's residence, they all got out. Matt said, "You need to think this through. Once you go after Bullseye, you will undoubtedly come into Kingpin's sight. Confronting Kingpin is a true life-or-death struggle, not comparable to dealing with a few muggers or thieves in Hell's Kitchen. He will use every imaginable and unimaginable brutal means to kill you. He might become your lifelong nightmare, and wherever you go, you'll need to watch out for his assassins, just like me." Peter stood on the other side of the car, looking at Matt. The street lights had gone out, leaving only the faint reflections of lights from residential buildings in the car windows. Peter asked, "Do you regret it? When you were lying on the operating room bed, did you regret getting involved in all this?" "If I hadn't gotten involved, I'd probably be in a high-end downtown apartment right now, preparing for a court trial the next day. Maybe I'd be thinking about when to discuss engagement with my girlfriend, or whether to get a dog." Erica chimed in, "But now, you're like a rat in the street. Forget about getting a dog. Even if you had a tropical fish, its corpse would show up at your bedroom door the next day. I didn't think through my decision at that time. Do you think I spent a year pondering before taking action? In fact, I plunged into this bottomless abyss with a heart full of hatred and determination," Matt said. "While I truly hope you become a superhero because your abilities can save many people, that's also why I'm willing to train you. But I'm not trying to deceive you. I have to remind you that opposing Kingpin means there's no turning back. You have to be both just and powerful. If you lack either one, you're on a one-way path to destruction." Episode 65, Little Spider's Grand Adventure, 1. In Peter's pursuit of Bullseye, things were not going as smoothly as he had hoped. His first obstacle was the simple fact that he couldn't locate Bullseye. The truth was, Hell's Kitchen had a transient population, and even as Spider-Man, there was no way he could check everyone's identity in the area in such a short amount of time. As Erica had mentioned, Bullseye was incredibly cunning, and he knew he had many enemies. Thus, his movements were erratic. Peter had recently tracked him down to a nightclub entrance, only for Bullseye to disappear overnight. With so many buildings and gangs in Hell's Kitchen, finding Bullseye's hideout proved to be an arduous task. Now Peter understood why Matt had been so precise in dismantling Kingpin's criminal empire. It must have required tremendous effort. Peter felt a bit disheartened. In the past, he had frequently patrolled Hell's Kitchen, occasionally dealing with muggers or thieves on the outskirts of the area. He had even taken down a few armed drug dealers. However, organized crime and lone criminals were entirely different. Some gangs and criminal organizations were difficult to eradicate because they had deep-rooted influence in the area, and everyone was their eyes and ears. This presented a significant challenge for Peter's investigation, and it was clear that Bullseye had become vigilant. But Peter was not one to give up easily. He was intelligent and recognized his strengths. After aimlessly wandering around Hell's Kitchen without results, Peter decided to seek assistance from modern science and technology. One noon, Schiller watched as Peter placed a large box on the table with a resounding thud. When he opened it, there was an oddly shaped computer inside, integrated with the box. The keyboard was unconventional, and there was no mouse, but it was connected to a complex web of wires and antennas. Peter tinkered with it incessantly, the blue light from the screen reflecting on his face, while Pikachu watched from the side. Peter said, "Do you want to track mobile phone signals? Intercept communications in Hell's Kitchen?" "Correct. People around here probably have little awareness of network and signal encryption. I got a bunch of outdated equipment from a friend's dad and assembled this. It may not be perfect, but it'll do the job. But with so many mobile phones and network signals, even if you intercept and decode them all, won't it still be a painstaking process to identify Bullseye among them? That's what I'm working on now. I've already tested signal interception. It's not too difficult. Currently, I'm writing a program to intelligently extract communication content." Schiller stood there, arms crossed, and asked, "So when did you two plan this?" Pikachu, munching on a jar of peanut butter, replied, "Don't forget, I'm a detective, and this kid hired me." "Correct. I needed someone to help me. I needed someone to watch my back." "I'm grateful you chose a rat over me," Schiller said. "Oh, don't get me wrong, Doctor," Peter said, somewhat embarrassed. "I just didn't want to trouble you all with this. I planned to handle it myself. Why else would I assemble this computer? Stark Tower has all the advanced computers one could imagine, Forget monitoring Hell's Kitchen, I could monitor the entire Manhattan area without any issues. As Peter rapidly typed away on the keyboard, he continued earnestly, I realized that I shouldn't rely too much on others. When I heard Matt talk about his experiences fighting criminals, it seemed like a simple matter, just beating up bad guys, right? How hard could it be? But when I tried it myself, I discovered how challenging it actually is. It's not just about cutting one thread, it's about unraveling a tangled mess and pinpointing the one thread that could be lethal. Schiller applauded him, saying, Has anyone ever told you that you have a real talent for this? Peter seemed like he was born to be a superhero, strong, kind, and, more importantly, possessing a sharp wit that most people lacked. Soon, the screen emitted a blue flash, and Peter stopped typing, saying, It's done. Now I just have to wait a few hours. As long as he sent any signals related to his identity during that time, I'll be able to capture his trail. What's your plan after that? A direct frontal assault? Pikachu asked. No, Peter shook his head. Actually, Captain had given me a lot of tactical advice earlier. I didn't pay much attention at the time, but when I thought about it recently, I realized that much of it might come in handy. With that, Peter took out a map from his backpack, unfolding it and pointing to a section. Look here, this is Hell's Kitchen. Do you see these lines I've drawn? I found an old map of New York's sewer system at a newsstand. I marked out the Hell's Kitchen section on this map. You can see that the sewers connect to most of Hell's Kitchen's main buildings, and the distribution of exits is quite even. From point A at the southernmost end to point B at the northernmost end, the distance between each manhole cover is almost the same, forming a uniform circular pattern. This is a natural approach route. I only need to start from here, see this red I marked? I'll enter from here. At my running speed, it'll take me less than 5 minutes to reach the central buildings of Hell's Kitchen, about 10 minutes for the second ring of buildings, and even the outermost ones will take less than 15 minutes. As long as I catch the signal, I can be inside the building where Bullseye is in no more than 15 minutes, said Pikachu. I guess he won't choose the closest or the farthest ring, but rather the middle layers of Hell's Kitchen, just like us, Pikachu continued. I agree. While the central part is Kingpin's territory, Bullseye knows he'd be closely watched there. He must have his own stronghold on the outskirts, added Pikachu. Capturing him there would be much easier than infiltrating a place full of Kingpin's goons, Peter chimed in. Peter had a natural talent for computers, and in less than 20 minutes, the screen suddenly lit up again. He hastily began typing on the keyboard, then stopped, jumped up, grabbed his backpack, and shouted, Keep an eye out for me. Use the walkie-talkie if there's any activity. Pikachu gave him an assuring gesture. Peter quickly made his way to the nearest sewer entrance. Just as he expected, the New York sewer system was a labyrinth, but he followed the map and arrived a few minutes earlier than anticipated. When Peter emerged from a manhole cover, he found himself on a street south of Hell's Kitchen. Schiller's psychological clinic was to the north, a few streets away from Matt's apartment. Bullseye had a knack for choosing strategic locations, and the signal led to a junkyard, a place seldom frequented by ordinary folks. But this place was remarkably suitable for Peter. The junkyard featured uneven terrain, various objects that could be used as weapons, and several junk trucks that could serve as cover against projectiles. Though Peter wasn't well versed in terrain tactics, he instinctively felt that this place would be advantageous for a fight. Silently skirting the edge of the junkyard, Peter's spider sense heightened as he concentrated. He even had a vague three-dimensional map of his surroundings within a few meters in his mind. On a two-story building behind the junkyard, Peter scaled the wall effortlessly. He used a strand of spider web to dangle headfirst and peered into a window. Sure enough, Bullseye was inside, chatting with someone and smoking a cigarette. Peter's nose twitched as he caught a whiff of marijuana in the air. He retracted his spider web, retrieved a red and blue combat suit from his backpack, and muttered, I forgot to ask Mr. Stark for a gas mask. Damn Hell's Kitchen. After donning his Spider-Man suit, Peter didn't hesitate. He swung in through the broken window. Bullseye's henchman, who was closer to the window, hadn't turned around yet and was promptly knocked out by Peter's kick. Bullseye dropped his cigarette, cursed, and blocked Peter's punch with his arm. If Peter were an ordinary person, Bullseye's move might have been an effective defense. But the strength from his spider mutation, though not fully developed, was beyond that of an ordinary person. Bullseye took Peter's punch head-on and was sent flying. However, he proved himself as a master acrobat. In midair, he twisted his body, executed a somersault, and landed smoothly. He sprinted toward the back door, with Peter in pursuit. But the stench in the room and the lingering cigarette smoke made Peter's senses less acute. It wasn't until a click sound as the back door opened that Peter chased after Bullseye, only to be met with 3 flying darts. Peter couldn't afford to take them head-on and rolled to the side. He shot his spider web, swinging from the back door's wall, and landed in the junkyard, where Bullseye stood atop a small mound of garbage. "Huh, who's this reckless fellow? Thinks he can cause trouble in Hell's Kitchen just by wearing a weird suit?" Bullseye taunted. Peter paid him no attention, landing and delivering a swift kick. Steve had once taught Peter an effective tactic during tactical training, and Schiller had endorsed it. When facing a villain, never let them talk too much. As soon as the adversary opened their mouth, deliver a decisive punch. There was plenty of time to talk after they were down. What honor was there in conversing with villains? This tactic seemed to work brilliantly. Before Bullseye could even finish his sentence, Peter unleashed a flurry of punches. Bullseye was forced to roll and dodge. Peter resisted the urge to speak and continued his relentless assault. Bullseye struggled to withstand Peter's immense strength, even a glancing blow was painful. When Bullseye punched Spider-Man, the latter barely budged, but when Spider-Man struck back, Bullseye was sent flying. If it weren't for Bullseye's excellent balance and agility, he would have been down for the count long ago. Seeing the unfavorable situation, Bullseye hurled a set of darts. While Spider-Man dodged to the side, Bullseye pulled a small spherical object from his pocket and tossed it to the ground. A faint hiss followed, and a cloud of tear gas filled the air. It wasn't a smoke screen to obscure vision, rather, it was a mini tear gas grenade. The noxious fumes left Peter gasping for breath, and he coughed violently. When he regained his composure, Bullseye had vanished. Episode 66, Little Spider's Grand Adventure, 2. Inside the Shield Lounge, Steve pointed at a diagram on the whiteboard and said, "As I mentioned before, tactical proficiency isn't just about pre-planning the operation, it's equally important to synchronously understand the enemy's intentions, even anticipate their actions before they do. The reason your last operation failed was partly because you didn't accomplish this. You chose to climb to the rooftop first, which is a good move. Seizing a tactical high ground is indeed crucial. However, you made a fatal mistake afterward. First, you didn't ascertain how many exits the building had and rashly charged inside. Secondly, when conducting operations inside a structure, we generally discourage assaults from high levels. Once you start driving the enemy from above, they'll instinctively move downwards. If there are exits on the lower floors, they can safely leave the building. The correct approach is either to encircle from both top and bottom simultaneously or conduct a systematic assault from bottom to top. If you drive the enemy from the lower levels, they will only have the option to move upward and either choose to jump out of a window or get trapped inside, unable to use ground exits. Do you understand?" Peter was seated at a coffee table in front, writing and drawing in his notebook while asking, "But what if breaking through a door creates noise? What if they become alert? I entered through the window to catch them off guard." Your approach is correct. Speed is essential in building-based assaults, as I mentioned earlier. If you plan to drive them from bottom to top, you must first secure all exits before taking action and then breach a window. In fact, I don't highly recommend this method. Even though you have unique advantages, your opponent is more knowledgeable about the location and building structure as they are operating in their own territory. While you caught them off guard, entering a strange building made the environment entirely unfamiliar to you. If there were any traps in the room, you might not have reacted quickly enough. Peter wanted to mention his spider sense, but he reconsidered. Steve had a point. Although he saw two people inside when he was hanging from the window, what if Bullseye had set up an ambush? If he knocked over a cup, suddenly dozens of henchmen could charge from anywhere. His spider sense was good for on-the-spot reactions, but it wasn't a crystal ball, nor could it see through walls. Peter continued writing in his notebook, and Steve added, "Furthermore, you already know your adversary is a cunning criminal. You mentioned earlier that a junkyard is a suitable battleground for you too, but don't forget, he has spent far more time there than you. A crafty opponent like him has undoubtedly rehearsed multiple escape routes in his mind. Even if he didn't use tear gas on you, a momentary lapse in concentration would have given him the chance to escape." Peter sighed, saying, "I thought my plan was pretty careful, but it seems I made a lot of mistakes. It's clear that I lost fairly." Steve walked over and sat next to him, patting his shoulder. "It's normal. You already have a lot of talent. Remember, I've seen those guys in the military who were too scared to even attempt a high-altitude parachute jump, let alone stand on a rooftop. They were trembling just standing on a rooftop, not to mention airborne assaults. You're way ahead of most people from the start." Peter closed his notebook, saying, "Next time, I won't let him escape." An hour later, in the laboratory of Stark Tower, Stark was holding an antenna and saying, "The way you're daisy-chaining these connections, while stable, isn't maximizing the antenna's effectiveness. Don't talk to me about material limitations. Back in Afghanistan, didn't I build a mech armor out of scrap copper and rusty iron? I could make a better computer than yours when I was 6. Also, your understanding of the smart retrieval system is too shallow. Do you think creating an automatic filtering system counts as smart? Why don't you try crafting a complete AI logic? Stark put down the wire, snapped his fingers, and a screen descended from the ceiling. He pointed at the map on it and said, "Look here, this is Hell's Kitchen, right? It has an overall spindle shape, so your signal coverage area doesn't need to be a perfect circle. You can use different wave frequencies to maximize efficiency, like this. Furthermore, you could find a stronghold and build a simple signal tower on top of it to monitor specific signals in Hell's Kitchen." Peter thought for a moment, then used a laser pointer to indicate the central intersection of Hell's Kitchen on the map. He said, "I've already found the central point, where I used the sewer to get around before. Do you think we can place a signal device there? What approach should I take? I feel like my current method, while stable, is not efficient enough." Several hours later, it was getting dark, and Schiller was about to close up when Peter squeezed through the door crack. "I heard your operation didn't go smoothly," Schiller remarked. Seeing Peter looking somewhat disheartened, he nodded and said, "Indeed, while your technology to monitor others' mobile phone signals is effective, I don't believe it's the best method. True, it's a straightforward and effective approach, but it's overly crude, causing you to overlook many details. Bullseye's trail isn't as invisible as you might think. You're just lacking in reconnaissance and counter-reconnaissance awareness." Peter sat down on the sofa, took a sip of water, and Schiller pulled out his medical records before saying, "Do you know where the most well-informed sources of information about Hell's Kitchen are?" Peter shook his head. "I ask you, what are the two things that people can't escape from? Death and taxes?" "Correct. So, what do you think these two correspond to in Hell's Kitchen?" "I haven't heard of a hospital or a tax bureau in Hell's Kitchen," Peter replied, shaking his head. "You must understand that without knowing the rules of Hell's Kitchen, you are unlikely to successfully combat crime here." Peter admitted, "Well, I admit I was a bit impulsive last night. The moment I thought of what happened to Matt, I couldn't help but want to beat that guy up." Schiller explained, "Hell's Kitchen may not have a proper hospital or tax bureau, but after gang shootouts here, gang members still get injured. Who treats them? Where do these doctors come from? Who employs them? Is there any special information we can gather? And while Hell's Kitchen lacks a tax bureau, these gangs collect a lot of protection fees, and there are numerous industries operating here. Do you really think these gang leaders who never graduated from middle school handle their finances themselves? Who are their accountants? When do they arrive? Do any of them know the gang leader you're looking for? Have they recently come into contact with the person you're searching for?" Schiller continued, "Furthermore, what about the truck drivers who shuttle through the streets of Hell's Kitchen every day? The taxi and bus drivers? Even if they are part of a gang, they still have to eat. Where does Bullseye order his food? Has he hired any chefs recently? Moreover, has he been to any strip clubs or solicited prostitutes?" Schiller pointed to the map Peter had opened with his finger and said, "A person living in this world can never leave no trace. Someone within a society must interact with others in that society. Perhaps, what you imagine as investigation involves searching for physical evidence, like footprints under a magnifying glass, or waiting for someone to leave behind some tangible trace before you can discover something. But in reality, every person they've seen, every word they've said, leaves some trace, large or small." Schiller shook his head and said, "This Bullseye is no master of counterintelligence. If you're willing to invest more patience in investigating these matters, you might not even need to engage in physical combat. Investigation is not the prelude to a battle, it's a requiem for the soul. If one day you truly master this skill, you'll understand that to deal with these criminals, you don't need to exert physical force. I'm not talking about using narcotics or poisoning food and drinks with some petty tricks. If you can figure out a person's entire network of social relationships, understand every trace they've left in society, you can leverage countless opportunities from these relationships, achieving great results with minimal effort. You don't have to sever any threads, you can deftly unravel the tangled web and reshape it according to your desires." This time, Peter didn't jot down any notes or doodles in his notebook. Instead, he said, "I may not fully grasp all of this now, but maybe one day when I put it into practice, it will come back to me. In truth, I still prefer throwing punches. I always feel that when I resort to these methods, the situation has probably gone terribly wrong." With the sound of the clinic's rolling shutter closing behind him, Peter concluded. 2 days later, a man with target marks on his head was dumped at the doorstep of the Manhattan police station. Across the street on the rooftop, Spider-Man stood watching as the police took Bullseye inside. The bustling streets of New York City at dusk continued, and this little incident attracted the attention of many passers-by, but they soon hurriedly moved on. "I'm quite surprised," Matt's voice came from behind Spider-Man. He held his cane and said, "In just a few days, you've neutralized Kingpin's biggest informant in Hell's Kitchen." "How did you do it?" Peter stood on the rooftop's edge, hearing Matt's voice. He turned around. Removing the headpiece of his combat suit, his tousled hair danced in the light of the setting sun, turning into floating strands of gold. He smiled with the youthful innocence and cheerfulness of his age. He replied, "Well, that's probably because I'm really good at making friends." Episode 67, Black Sun and the Bat Signal, 1. On a gloomy and chilly morning in Gotham City, the students of Gotham University gathered for their psychology final exam. As Professor Evans distributed the exam papers, a collective sigh and murmur swept through the classroom. Then, from outside the door, the echoing sound of leather shoes on the marble floor filled the air. In an instant, the classroom fell into complete silence. Professor Schiller, carrying his umbrella, entered the classroom. He noticed everyone diligently writing and nodded in satisfaction. Placing his umbrella firmly on the ground, he rested his hand on its handle and stood at the center of the classroom. "The duration of this exam is 1 hour and 40 minutes, he announced. "In theory, you can submit your papers early, but I find proctoring here quite dull. If you turn in your papers early, I will certainly start grading them ahead of time. At the very least, ensure that the content you write is enough for me to read until you exit this classroom. Additionally, although I haven't assigned specific seating, it would be best if you refrain from whispering to one another. Maintain neat handwriting on your answer sheets, avoid using ornate fonts, and most importantly, please write your full legal names. I mean the names on your legal documents. Don't make me repeat the same request I had to make during the first week of classes, reminding you not to use nicknames. Now, begin your examination." The entire classroom fell into a profound silence, with only the sound of pens scratching against paper. Never before had any classroom at Gotham University witnessed such an intense atmosphere of study. In the midst of writing, Bruce glanced up and noticed a troublesome youngster from the East District, the nephew of a local troublemaker who had a penchant for cigarettes and alcohol, sitting in front of him. Despite his rebellious nature, he was diligently writing, and Bruce wondered if his alcohol and cigarette-fueled brain was somehow managing to support him through the exam. To Bruce's left sat a well-known graffiti artist from Gotham University. He was renowned for his wall art, often leaving walls in a chaotic state. He even sprayed a comical caricature of the principal in the hallway during Selden's campus alcohol ban. But now, he seemed to be struggling, unable to answer the very first essay question. Instead, he was creating various designs on his answer sheet. Bruce, with his keen eyesight, glimpsed at his work and saw that he was drawing Professor Schiller. Unlike his usual satirical graffiti, this portrayal depicted Schiller with his back to a black sun, arms outstretched, surrounded by patterns resembling tiny particles. The whole image looked eerie yet strikingly cool. Bruce wondered if Schiller would appreciate the extra effort and give him a higher score. Half an hour passed, and surprisingly, more than 2/3 of the students were still writing. This was nothing short of a miracle for Gotham University. In previous final exams, several troublemakers would be absent right from the start. Seats would remain vacant. Within 2 minutes of starting, some students would finish writing their names and leave. 10 minutes later, many would guess their way through the multiple-choice questions, put down their pens, and hand in their papers, exiting the classroom. Historically, after 20 minutes, only a handful of students would remain, and they wouldn't be working on the essay questions. They would simply take advantage of the quiet classroom to catch up on some much-needed sleep. But now, Bruce glanced at his watch after 40 minutes had passed, and remarkably, half the students were still writing. None dared to submit their papers early. While most were on the brink of mental exhaustion, they clenched their pens, hoping to squeeze a few more words onto their answer sheets, trying to present answers that weren't too far from being illiterate or semi-literate, hoping to appease Professor Schiller when he eventually read their responses. In truth, even for an introductory psychology textbook, the various specialized terms, names, theories, and definitions were challenging. For these Gotham University students, who were more accustomed to avoiding scholarly pursuits, recollection was a daunting task. Memorization, for minds that hadn't seen much action in a while, was a Herculean effort, especially when cramming in just 1 or 2 weeks. After an hour had passed, the majority of students had put down their pens. Bruce jotted down the names of those still fervently writing on a piece of scratch paper. They would become the backbone of his future psychology club. After a moment's thought, he included the graffiti artist's name on the list. After all, a club needed someone with artistic flair for promotion. Finally, after a seemingly endless 1 hour and 40 minutes, when Professor Schiller firmly placed the words, "Time's up" on the floor, the classroom erupted with relieved sighs. It was evident they had been on the brink of insanity. Even after collecting their papers, nobody dared to leave until Schiller had stapled the exams together, checked them, and ensured everyone's names were legible. Only then, carrying a stack of answer sheets, did he exit the classroom. As soon as he left, the classroom exploded with chatter and commotion, like a bomb had just gone off. Oh no. I didn't know most of the fill-in-the-blank questions. I'm doomed. Damn it, I crammed all those psychology definitions last night, and they didn't even come up on the test. I should have spent less time on them in the beginning. I accidentally wrote the answer to the second essay question in the space for the fourth. What am I going to do now? I'm sure to get a 0 on that essay. Any of you applied for postgraduate programs? Evans, did you? My dad told me yesterday that if my brain were to attend postgraduate school, we might as well expect our dog to climb trees. But my dog is a corgi. I still owe 2 papers, and I have to complete them before the break. Otherwise, I'll be anxious throughout the entire vacation, and there won't be any fun. Several students gathered around Bruce's desk. They were the first members he had invited to join his club. Rennie, the graffiti artist with a fluorescent yellow headband, declared, "Professor will appreciate my artwork. I can tell he's a person with artistic sensibilities." "But he might prefer to see the correct answers," Bruce replied. "Forget it, I'm clueless. Memorization will contaminate my brain," Rennie said, rubbing his nose. He was a typical dramatic type, with green eyes and a few freckles, dressed in a reggae-style outfit. And who says that isn't the correct answer? Who says you have to write to answer questions? Drawing is just as good, I'll pass. Alright, I'll pay you to create a larger and more impactful poster for our club's promotion. You can set the price as you wish, but I want it to be truly awe-inspiring, Bruce said. Lenny snapped his fingers and said, "Rich person, you've come to the right place. Nobody in all of Gotham understands the art of awe like me." Several heads huddled together, whispering excitedly. "What? Are you saying you want? You're a genius. Count me in, I want one too. This is a big surprise." "Right, I'm in too. Maybe, in exchange for this, he'll pass us." A few days later, Schiller was grading papers and accumulating frustration as he had anticipated the subpar performance of the students at Gotham University. However, he hadn't expected them to perform this poorly. Not wanting to let these academic underachievers further taint his mind, Schiller decided to put in extra hours today, planning to finish grading all the papers in one go and give a failing grade to most of them. Suddenly, he heard a sharp, piercing sound from outside his office window. It sounded somewhat like a fire alarm, but shorter and sharper. Schiller stood up and looked out the window, noticing some lights swaying. It was still early in the evening, not yet dark enough for street lights to come on, and most teachers and students were still at the school. He heard a commotion below, as if someone was calling his name. Schiller put down his pen and left his desk to go to the window. The entire side of the building across from him was covered by a massive curtain. Schiller had heard it was for a wall renovation, but he didn't usually take that route, so he hadn't paid much attention. As he approached the window, the curtain suddenly dropped, revealing an enormous graffiti painting. It was as tall as 7 stories, with Schiller's silhouette at the bottom and a black sun with countless intricate patterns above it. A row of spotlights below lit up, making the entire side of the building as bright as daylight. The graffiti depicted Schiller's silhouette nearly blending into the black sun's background, as if the sun itself was his shadow. Schiller, momentarily blinded by the high-powered spotlights, blinked and was met with this astonishing sight. Schiller. Symbiote, wow. The side of the graffiti read, "Join the psychology club, confront the hearts, confront this black sun. Blue Devil Lenny." Schiller lowered his gaze and saw a group of excited people waving at him from below. They were mostly psychology majors from Gotham University, including Bruce Wayne. Schiller looked back at the black sun, composed of countless eerie patterns. It exuded a strange and terrifying aesthetic that held one's gaze captive, as if it were about to draw one's very soul inside. Terrifying, mysterious, bizarre, and absurd, yet filled with an irresistible beauty. Schiller recalled that Gotham originally meant Fool's Village, and indeed, it was full of all sorts of absurd fools, lost in life and uncertain of death. But at the same time, it was filled with geniuses who possessed unparalleled talents and an enchanting vitality. Schiller found himself captivated by this bold and eccentric absurdity, a special life force unlike anything in the world, like a terrifying vine climbing out of an endless abyss, or a masterpiece equal to countless masters. Schiller knew more than these students, but he had just realized that there was one thing he had yet to learn. He had not yet learned Gotham. Everyone living here was mad, yet also sane. This dark city didn't need anyone to set it straight, its people lived in such madness within the abyss, cultivating a twisted and enigmatic vitality. This vitality grew out of the darkness, and the people here used madness as their blade, piercing straight into the hearts of anyone they encountered. Schiller stared directly at the black sun. Perhaps everyone here was an incomparable genius, and the only fool was himself, along with anyone outside the comics trying to be a savior. People here, with brains devoid of even a shred of psychological theory knowledge, read minds as if it were a natural talent. The black sun was still a sun, and it was a strikingly accurate depiction of Schiller's profile. Schiller's incarnation, indeed, was not the scorching sun but a sun that would never shine, a black sun. After a few minutes, Schiller used his finger to write a line on the mist-covered glass, "You all pass." In an instant, the building erupted with enthusiastic cheers. Under the black sun, it seemed like the subjects illuminated by an ever-dark star, celebrating a new beginning. Episode 68, Black Sun and the Bat Signal, 1. During the winter break, both the faculty and graduate student apartments at Gotham University remained open, and most laboratories continued their work. Schiller, who only had accommodation in the Gotham University faculty apartments and no other place to go, stayed behind when the break was announced, continuing to sequester himself in his school office to work on his research papers. Schiller's grades for the psychology department at Gotham University were not ideal, which meant his evaluation score wouldn't be very high. To boost his credentials during this period, he needed to publish more articles. Most of the students at Gotham University were idle and lacked direction. Since Gotham was not a very large city, most students were in a state of readiness, always on call. Bruce took advantage of the early break to organize the psychology club. He seemed quite enthusiastic about it, and it was not surprising. He needed a cover, as his exam scores were only mediocre. However, he was eager to learn from Schiller, so organizing the club was a good choice. One day, Bruce was carrying materials for the club's preparations, intending to give them to Schiller. He stood outside Schiller's office, not even knocking, as he overheard a conversation on the telephone. "Have you considered a frontal lobotomy? Inhumane? Is letting them run rampant in the hospital humane? What about Mrs. Adela? She still refuses to wear the restraints? How about I introduce you to a few female enforcers from Mary Street's gang? They can serve as nurses and get things under control in no time. Mr. Norman is also refusing treatment? Won't take his medication? I've reviewed his medical records, he has a feud with the local gang. I'll make a call to their leader to pay him a visit, and he'll be more cooperative. Forget about those drunkards. Whether they are ill or not, alcohol will be their best friend. Someone trying to sell them alcohol? Vodka delivered with medication? I remember your underling, Douglas, used to work for Gotham's largest liquor distributor. Have him write a letter to his former boss, saying the Godfather advises against selling alcohol to the mental hospital. Do they want the patients to go crazier? That patient from the alley on Deer Street is tangled up in a family inheritance dispute. You don't need to get involved in that mess. Let them deal with it themselves. We take in the insane here, not the poor souls with ill intentions. Tomorrow, I'll bring my students over. You hold on for one more day. What? Your worries are a bit excessive. One of the students I'm bringing is the Godfather's son, and the other. At that moment, the door suddenly swung open, and Schiller turned to see Bruce standing at the doorway. He said, "The other is the world's richest person." After hearing the contents of the telephone conversation, Bruce was seriously considering not going in. Professor Schiller sounded like a mad scientist. Putting the telephone down and seeing Bruce still standing there, Schiller said, "Come in. I've got a good internship opportunity for you, considering how well you've managed the club." Bruce cleared his throat and hesitated for a moment before saying, "Your approach to treatment is quite different from what I imagined." "What did you imagine? Lecturing patients with lengthy explanations of psychology knowledge from textbooks? Isn't that how it should be, at least? At least it shouldn't involve making phone calls to gangs to intimidate people," Bruce thought. "Is this psychological treatment or physical treatment?" Schiller shook his head and said, "Criminal psychology is a form of applied psychology. The focus of applied psychology is on application, not just psychology. If this were Metropolis, I might try talking to them. But this is Gotham, and over half the patients in Arkham Asylum were forcibly admitted due to gang conflicts. What about the other half? Alcoholics who fried their brains, drug addicts so high they can't think straight, and people who came here to escape from threats of murder. Not a single genuinely mentally ill patient?" Schiller put his hands on his hips and tapped the desk with his pen. "In a large-scale mental hospital, why should we build a smaller one just for the mentally ill?" Bruce wanted to reply, but he realized Schiller had a point. Gotham was a place where almost everyone had some form of mental illness. There were hardly any truly normal people. "And what can I do? Cure them of their mental illnesses? Make them positive and optimistic, turn them into kind, normal individuals? They'd be headed straight for the crematorium after release, anyway, they wouldn't last 3 days." Bruce asked, "How's Jonathan doing?" Go see him for yourself tomorrow, Schiller replied. Bruce sat across from him and said, I've been thinking about your suggestion lately. I believe I do need a strong base. It should be a comprehensive facility, housing a prison, warehouse, monitoring center, and laboratory. I also plan to establish a comprehensive surveillance system, covering the entire city of Gotham. Inspired by Renee, I think I can design a distinctive symbol for myself, so people know who I am and who they should turn to for help. Have you decided on that symbol? The bat. It has to be the bat. I know it's the bat. What I'm asking is, are you really prepared to go all the way with the city? Schiller tapped the desktop with his pen. You still have an option to retreat for now. Batman is just an eccentric vigilante. But once you take full control of this city, offering everyone the chance to call on you to fight criminals, you'll have no way back. When people know there's a mysterious and powerful hero they can call upon, it will become a part of their lives. They'll take it for granted, and you'll get involved in some unimaginable troubles. Even if you want to walk away, you won't be able to. Bruce said, I believe I'm prepared, but what makes me doubt myself now is whether I have the capability. Schiller straightened up and began gathering the documents on his desk. As he tidied up, he said, You not only have the capability, but you'll surpass it. Why do you seem so confident in me? Because you are Batman. With that, Schiller stood up and left the room. On the second day, Schiller and Bruce set off from Gotham University and drove to Arkham Asylum. Originally, Evans was supposed to join them at school first, but there were some issues in Falcone's industry that required his son's attention. He had to delay his internship by 2 days, leaving only Schiller and Bruce for this trip. Interning with Batman at Arkham Asylum might sound peculiar, but during this period, Arkham Mental Hospital was not yet the infamous haven for lunatics that it later became. As Schiller had mentioned earlier, most of the individuals in Arkham at that time were not genuine psychiatric patients. As a result, the head doctor, Brand, had been driven nearly insane. He was an old classmate of Schiller's, arriving at Arkham just 2 months ahead of him. In Brand's words, his tenure at Arkham Asylum was the greatest challenge of his life. Schiller reminisced about what Brand had told him the previous day regarding the current state of the mental hospital as he drove. They hadn't even left the university grounds when they got stuck on the road. A less than 200-meter straight road took them nearly half an hour to traverse. Schiller had thought that New York had its share of traffic congestion, but he never imagined that Gotham, especially during rush hours, could surpass it. In Gotham, the basic traffic rule was survival of the fittest, where most people treated their cars as valuable possessions but their lives as expendable. The only role of the Red Green Lantern here was to amuse those stuck in traffic, and road signs were only useful when someone suffering from road rage decided to kick them. Schiller had never driven on Gotham's streets during peak hours before, as both his work and life were confined to Gotham University. When their car finally reached the roundabout, Schiller didn't move. Another wave of cars passed, but Schiller remained stationary. After the cars on the roundabout completed a full rotation, Schiller still hadn't moved. Professor, when do you plan to? When do you plan to go? Bruce asked. I'm signaling, can't you see? Schiller replied. But. Bruce was momentarily speechless. He said, Are you not familiar with Gotham's traffic rules? Of course not. I just finished reading the Metropolis Driver's Manual yesterday. But that's for Metropolis, Gotham doesn't have such a thing. Have you ever considered? Schiller floored the gas pedal and aggressively turned the steering wheel, that maybe it's because they don't have it that it's such a mess here. Bruce rubbed his ear and shifted to the side. In the end, they abandoned the car and took a helicopter from Wayne's nearby tallest building to reach the mental hospital. Upon their arrival at the mental hospital, Brand came out to greet them. He was a slightly overweight doctor who seemed to have a good temperament, but now he appeared worn out. He warmly embraced Schiller upon seeing him, then shook hands with Bruce. He said, You're here quite early. I thought you'd arrive in the afternoon. We left in the morning. That's why I thought you'd be stuck until the afternoon. I didn't expect you so soon. He walked with Schiller, saying, Your suggestions have been a great help. I feel like I'm not here to treat patients, but to preside over a court case. How are the patients doing? Schiller asked. Patients? Oh, the patients. Brand said. Patients who can down 2 bottles of whiskey and smoke an entire pack of cigarettes after taking their meds are doing great. Just the other night, they had a card game in the basement storage room, betting on when I would resign. Schiller patted his shoulder and said, Don't mind it. Gotham is like that. Brand gave a bitter smile and said, But if I had any other choice, I wouldn't be here. Isn't it the same for me? Brand shook his head and said, You and I are not quite the same. I'm hiding from enemies, though you are too, but if you weren't. At this point, he glanced at Bruce and fell silent. Bruce's curiosity immediately piqued. It seemed that this Dr. Brand had some understanding of Professor Schiller's past. "Well, let's get to work," Schiller said. Brand pushed open the door to his office and said, "I hope you don't mind using my office. The facilities in this hospital are quite outdated, but this is the best we have. The main issue now is that since the new police station chief took office, many criminals he has sentenced require psychiatric evaluations, and many are planning to reserve beds here. With so many people coming in, and the composition being so complicated, the doctors and nurses here are overwhelmed." Brand wore a troubled expression as he continued, "You know, these people bring a lot of trouble with them. Just this week, the hospital's windows were smashed 18 times, at least a dozen different factions of hitmen have come in, 4 people have died, including an unlucky security guard. Not to mention the one smuggling marijuana and high-proof liquor. It doesn't look promising, but without any connections, I can spend the entire winter break here, and things will eventually improve," Schiller said. Bruce couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. Episode 69, The Black Sun and the Bat Signal, 2. "Hello? Help me transfer to the Godfather, please." "Good afternoon, the Godfather. I'd like to discuss some business with you." Inside the office of Arkham Asylum, Schiller hung up the telephone receiver, gave the cord a little tug, blew off the dust from the receiver, and poured himself a drink. He picked up the vintage telephone, dialed a number, and said, "Hello? Brand? You've made it to Hawaii? No need to worry, enjoy your vacation, I can handle it." After a while, Bruce walked in, placed a stack of documents in front of Schiller, who said, "It's quitting time. Would you like a drink?" "Thank you, but I don't drink." "You seem a bit worn out." "Well, I haven't slept for nearly 50 hours. Of course, your new giant bat signal has been quite active lately. The entire Gotham knows there's a Batman. But..." Bruce sighed, hesitated, and then said, "Pour me a drink, please." "What could make Batman drown his sorrows in alcohol?" Bruce said, "I feel like I shouldn't be doing this. The bat doesn't light the signal, and it shouldn't." Before Schiller could inquire further, Bruce continued, "I've set up 6 bat signal towers throughout Gotham. In the past few days, they've been activated a total of 25 times, and 19 of those times were pranks. So, I designed a failsafe for them. Afterward, I received 12 distress calls, all gang shootouts, asking me to back them up. I don't allow gangs to use them, so they wreak havoc instead. Of course, I designed a security protocol, and it's been somewhat effective. The poor and homeless press the signals, and the next day, they get killed by the gangs." Bruce covered his face, took a deep breath, and then took a sip of his drink, struggling to swallow it. He said, "Those beyond salvation shouldn't be saved by anyone. If this is Gotham, then I have to admit, I oversimplified things." "I knew there would be no bat lighting up the signal," Bruce concluded. "I suggest you take a few days off. When you encounter problems, sacrifice some rest time to deal with them. Then, when you face new challenges, continue in this way. It's a vicious cycle, and you need to stop. It's pointless." Bruce, looking weary, said, "All right, I'll go back to sleep. Tomorrow, I'll come to work, copy medical records, answer phones, make rounds, or whatever." The next day, Bruce indeed showed up for work as promised. Schiller was already seated in the office, sipping a steaming cup of coffee, while Bruce brewed himself a cup of black coffee and started reading a paper. After a while, a nurse knocked on the door and said, "Doctor, Andre in room 5 on the 2nd floor has been causing a commotion. He keeps demanding an increase in his morphine dosage or threatens to file a complaint against us." Schiller didn't even raise his head and replied calmly, "Give it to him, charge 3 times the market price. If he continues to complain, make it 5 times. Bruce nearly choked on his coffee. On the 3rd floor, Bert has been requesting pain medication all night. Tell him that the pill supplier fell off a railing last night, head first, and now we're out of stock. In hospital room number 6. Schiller flipped through the files and said, "Hall or Gall, doesn't matter. Tell him to send someone in, we'll split it 7-3. After the nurse left, before Bruce could speak, the telephone rang again, and Schiller picked it up while continuing to look through the files. "Hello? Whiskey shortage?" "Yes, I have the last bottle, who was it that claimed to have some?" "Let me check. Room 1 on the 4th floor. Tell him to bring a line from the bar, and warn him not to use counterfeit liquor, otherwise, I'll give him a permanent treatment recommendation." Schiller hung up the phone, then picked up the receiver again and dialed a number, saying into the telephone, "Tell them that killers are not allowed in here. To gain entry, they must have a door pass, which costs $100,000. The inpatient department door is $50,000, and above the 3rd floor, add another $30,000 for wear and tear. Buy the full security package, and we'll throw in a security patrol map. Hello? The equipment department said the brainwaves machine broke down yesterday. Whose patient is on the second floor, number 2? East District's old Bandel? Donate a machine to him and have him take the patient away. He can come for the rehab recommendation later. After hanging up the phone, Bruce said, Professor. Before he could finish, the telephone rang again, and Schiller answered, saying, Hello? No agreement reached? Tell him that the twins from the South are offering $500,000, and it's not a buyout. If he disagrees, he won't see a cent of the liquor business here. Hello? No, the security at Arkham Asylum is now handled by the Falcone family. If he wants to force his way in, let him try, and the Godfather sends his regards. Schiller had just hung up the phone when Bruce, looking deeply conflicted, was staring at him. His gaze held a mixture of shock, as if to say, how can you do this, and disdain, as if to say, I knew it. Don't look at me like that. The hospital is running smoothly, isn't it? But. Bruce opened his mouth to question Schiller but couldn't find a starting point. I made a deal with Falcone. He manipulated the black glove to provoke some lucrative gangs and had his police station underlings arrest them. I provided them with psychiatric diagnoses to admit them here. What happens next depends on whether their benefactors or adversaries offer more money. Bruce stared at Schiller, and Schiller shrugged, saying, What? Do you find it unbelievable? Or do you truly believe I'm a good person, just like Harvey? What gave you that illusion? Bruce was speechless. Over the next few days, Bruce watched helplessly as Schiller not only joined but also creatively forged a new Gotham-style industry chain. His esteemed professor seamlessly integrated into Gotham with a demeanor that left everyone in the dust, surpassing even the best. But Bruce couldn't find the words. In this perfect Gotham industry chain, the only ones harmed were the gangs. In terms of outcomes, the gangs were pitted against money, and Arkham Mental Hospital swiftly established order. The medical staff was safe, and the gang members within the hospital behaved impeccably. When Bruce made his rounds, he was surprised to hear them thank him, thinking he was a doctor who could prescribe painkillers. Some of the gang leaders, aware of his connection with Schiller, tried to get close to him, hoping to involve Schiller in their operations. Once, while following Schiller to review a case, Bruce overheard the nearby gang leader chatting. Colt is a bad kid, a complete scoundrel. He got his hands on absinthe and had another gang smashed to monopolize the liquor business here. He had conflicts with those twins. In my opinion, he did it quite smoothly, considering it's a multi-million-dollar operation. Is it really worth that much? That redhead downstairs, selling cigarettes here, makes 20 grand a week. Who doesn't smoke cigarettes here? Who doesn't enjoy cigars? He gets top-notch stuff from the pier, and people even come from afar to get a piece of this smuggling route. Room 2 is making a fortune too. Who doesn't know he's been lucky, getting in touch with the Godfather himself? Next quarter, he'll be opening another restaurant. Be careful when the nurses come around, put out the cigarettes. Don't anger those girls, they're all black widows under the Queen of Hearts. In just a few days within the hospital, Bruce witnessed a complex and perplexing world. Bruce wondered, what would he do if he were in Schiller's shoes? After much contemplation, he had to acknowledge that he couldn't come up with a more efficient or righteous solution. One night, Schiller was in a hospital room, speaking to a legless woman. It's going well, the medication is taking effect, and the excitement will subside soon. The woman lay on the bed, seemingly calm or perhaps numb, as if she couldn't hear Schiller's words. However, Schiller continued, we've had quite a few cases lately, but no relationships. The psychological therapy is almost complete. His voice was well suited for these nights, always carrying a calm strength. As Schiller turned around, he found Batman standing behind him. Batman's voice was deep. How did she end up here? You fixed her physical issues, helped with the amputation, but she has some congenital mental problems. She was admitted here earlier. Schiller glanced at Batman, his mouth always seemed to turn downward. Compared to daytime, he appeared colder and more sharp, making it hard for people to approach. You seem surprised. Do you think I only associate with gangs? What gave you that impression? Batman remained silent, and Schiller paid him no mind. He turned back and adjusted the woman's bed, then pulled up the blankets. Schiller didn't look at Batman. He asked, almost to himself, do you feel disappointed? For this ungrateful city, for those who aren't worth saving, and for those who won't let you save them? Do you think the bat signal decision was right? Batman's deep voice echoed in the hospital room. Schiller paused for a moment and replied, no need for disappointment. Even a black sun is still a sun. Batman may not light the way, but in the darkness, the bat's light is still light. Cold light illuminated the pristine hospital sheets. Schiller straightened up and turned his head to look out the window. Batman saw Schiller, backlit by the moonlight, casting a long shadow behind him. Batman looked up and saw, on most of the walls and ceilings, his own shadow, a bat with pointed ears. Bats don't light the way, he didn't even have a light to shine upon himself. In this world, there was never a light for him, and for years, there had been no glimmers of hope. But now, this bat decided to learn how to light a beacon, for the dark nights of this city, for this seemingly hopeless city. Batman also gazed out the window, at the faint, almost imperceptible lights in the pitch-black night. He thought that if, one day, the sun would never rise over this absurd city, at least on the eve of the apocalypse, there would still be his faint light in this chilly night. A light that illuminated in vain, yet still illuminated. A light that a bat had lit. Episode 70, Geniuses on the Left, Madmen on the Right, 1. Bruce never expected that his internship journey would be filled with so many unexpected twists and turns. The most perplexing aspect of it all was undoubtedly his psychology professor, Schiller. Despite being in Gotham for only a few months, Professor Schiller seemed more like a native than the actual locals. In fact, most locals couldn't match his level of understanding. Schiller rapidly deciphered all the intricacies of this city's rules, not only comprehending them thoroughly, but also excelling within their framework. Bruce had heard Gordon describe Gotham as a vast quagmire, and anyone who entered it would slowly sink into its inescapable mire. But Schiller, this self-proclaimed ordinary man and professor, plunged headfirst into this quagmire before Bruce's eyes. Not only did he react swiftly and move with agility, but he also dove into its deepest depths, without any intention of extricating himself. He transformed seamlessly, becoming even more enigmatic than the most enigmatic of individuals within the rotten underbelly of Gotham. From the personnel arrangements and geographical advantages in gang shootouts to the standards for protection fees at bars and restaurants, from the odds at underground casinos to the rules governing the trade of contraband goods and the security of arms shipments, there was nothing this professor didn't know. His advice was taken to heart by Falcone, who commended Schiller as a natural in this line of work. If he had arrived in Gotham 30 years earlier, 12 families would have made a seat for Rodriguez. This left Bruce with mixed feelings about Schiller. If you were to say that this professor was doing good deeds, his methods could hardly be considered honorable. He had willingly embraced the darkness. Yet, if you were to say he was causing harm, he undeniably used his abilities to continually reshape the existing situation in Gotham, employing unorthodox methods to steer it in the direction he desired. And, from Bruce's perspective, this change didn't seem to be heading in a negative direction. Instead, it established a precarious yet improved new order. Especially when Bruce received news from Gordon about a significant decrease in Gotham's crime rate over the past 2 weeks, he felt a sense of absurdity. Within the industry Schiller had shaped, the police had become significantly more powerful because they were aligned with Gotham's largest gang, the Falcone family. Since the police station received direct support from Falcone, the Godfather provided them with a wealth of heavy weaponry. They used the Godfather's influence to intimidate others. Now, whenever a gang shootout occurred, they could arrive at the scene within 10 minutes, swiftly suppressing both sides and apprehending them to be sent to the mental hospital. Unlike before, the enthusiasm of the police was soaring. Opportunities for fieldwork were in high demand, and as long as they brought in a new official member for the mental hospital, they could claim 2% of all fees paid for the inmate's stay as their reward. Gordon had been working tirelessly in recent days. Even those who had been known for slacking off were eager to take the front lines, fighting to maintain justice and combat the gangs. Lately, this righteous detective had forgotten what justice truly meant. Though the effective crackdown on gangs should have been a good thing, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Nevertheless, these actions not only curbed the gang's arrogance, but also improved the lives of the police officers, making them fall in love with their damned profession. To Gordon's astonishment, he discovered that the entire police station had people working overtime lately. Had they all been taken under the control of some devil? Indeed, it was the devil of greed, armed and unflinching. When you were wielding a fully loaded heavy machine gun and demanding the gangs to cease fire, you might find the job rather ordinary. And after doing so, receiving a substantial reward, it might just become the best job in the world. Initially, Falcone had dispatched his black gloves to instigate shootouts between certain gangs. But later, anger flared, and the hounds and the captain joined forces to ambush the interceptors from 2 blocks away. The locomotive from the edge of East District quickly joined the fray, and 3 out of the 4 Elizabeth Street Titans wanted to lend a hand. Maroney, fresh from disposing of the Red Raven gang's corpses, found himself in the midst of a chaotic battle, turning East District into a mess. Many gang members had already lost their lives in these shootouts between gangs. However, just when the fight was getting intense, the police charged onto the battlefield with heavy machine guns and rocket launchers. The gang members were left bewildered. Were they gangs, or were you gangs? Since when did the police use rocket launchers for law enforcement? As a result, they lost some of their own in the shootout and were then arrested by the police. The gangs in East District, known for their combat prowess, were severely weakened. They no longer dared to venture outside and retreated to lick their wounds in their own territories. Gordon's outdoor task force gained fame, and all of Gotham knew about their violent tactics. They charged in with armored trucks, set up bulletproof shields, indiscriminately sprayed gunfire with heavy machine guns, prioritized RPG strikes, advanced steadily, and finally cleared the area with hand grenades. The most formidable gangs in East District were left incapacitated, and those who remained dared not speak out. While this was largely due to Falcone's influence, since the old Godfather was willing to fully support the police, he held both reason and power. Most gangs were unwilling to pay the heavy price to challenge the old Godfather, and those who were willing had been brutally beaten by the sudden onslaught. Gotham had strangely quieted down. All of this was the result of an ordinary professor's moment of inspiration on one fateful morning. Bruce thought that Professor Schiller had become the black sheep among black sheep, as the troublemakers treated him as a comrade, yet he had become a friend of justice to his enemies. Bruce truly didn't know how to evaluate this behavior. Of course, Batman was a genius, and after his initial confusion, he saw a new possibility in Schiller's actions. He had always believed that fighting criminals should be swift and precise, using all means necessary to eradicate evil forces completely, preventing any resurgence. However, Schiller didn't follow this approach. Instead of eradicating them, he sometimes even nourished the criminal organizations he had once attacked, allowing them to grow stronger. Then, he used them as leverage to dismantle another complex network. After witnessing these actions, Bruce once again asked Schiller the same question. Bruce inquired, "Are you truly just an ordinary person, or is there some hidden, extraordinary power that enables you to accomplish all of this?" Schiller sat in his office chair, twirling the ballpoint pen in his hand before tapping it lightly on his desk, motioning for Bruce to take a seat. He replied, "I can tell you that I am an ordinary person, but the key to this answer lies not in whether I possess some mystical power that others do not. It lies in the fact that the most miraculous power of humans is their thinking minds." Schiller stood up and walked to the window, his white doctor's coat draped over him, making him appear even more imposing. Compared to the stern professor at school, Schiller, in his doctor persona, seemed calmer and gentler. He continued, "The answer to this question does not hinge on whether I am genuinely an ordinary person. It is, as I once advised you, not in your advanced armor or expensive equipment. None of those can make you a true Batman. Because the answers to the questions that trouble you are not found in these external things. They reside in the minds of ordinary people, in our own brains. In fact, if you take a moment to think calmly, you'll realize that pure violence cannot achieve any of your desired goals, whether it's revenge or saving this city. It's a path destined for failure." Schiller lowered his head, fiddling with the ballpoint pen in his hands, and continued, "Actually, the path you've chosen itself is a dead end. But if you wish to avoid that fate, you must find a way out among countless dead ends. I've merely shown you one method, not the entirety, and not." Bruce interrupted, "Isn't strength, intelligence, and determination enough?" Schiller replied, "There's also Gotham." "When can I learn about Gotham?" Bruce inquired. "Perhaps not until the day you die." Before Bruce could respond, Schiller added, "Gotham is a book that can never be fully read. I'm just a professor, and, just like I do in the classroom, I've highlighted key points for you. The rest, you must write for yourself." Bruce asked, "Are the key points about strategy and balance? Or is it the power of wisdom? Thinking and foresight?" "No, it's just like I do in the classroom, every part of the book is a key point." Bruce was left speechless, unsure if Schiller was mocking him for not paying attention in class or hinting at something deeper. But Schiller's answer made him realize something. Using violence to stop the crime in this city, filled with evil, was indeed a futile endeavor. If Batman's strength and wealth couldn't easily turn this quagmire into a level playing field, perhaps, aside from brute force, utilizing his other talent, his intelligence, to manipulate things from behind the scenes, would be a better approach. In this city saturated with violence, paradoxically, violence alone couldn't solve every problem. Mighty force was merely his entrance ticket, not the whole story. When he used his considerable resources and equipment to open the door, he encountered Schiller, his teacher. What Schiller showed Batman was a brand new Gotham. A Gotham that transcended the surface violence, bloodshed, and intense conflicts, a Gotham filled with countless mysteries and complex relationships. As Batman followed the intricate threads within the massive web, descending deep beneath the surface, and slid down the crevices of the iceberg into the frigid sea below, he finally saw the true face of Gotham. This is a new world, Batman thought. But for him, it was not a setback or a blow, it was a shot of adrenaline. His mind had never worked so quickly before, and he had never imagined that he possessed the ability to accept and untangle such intricate relationships so rapidly until he kept pace with Schiller's every move. The thrill of gradually uncovering the vast network's roots, like tracing the intricate veins of a giant tree, fascinated Batman. He experienced a more intense excitement and joy than pummeling criminals with his fists. Bruce thought, perhaps, this was the correct answer. Perhaps, he was the kind of person who, when faced with a complex puzzle that could make any ordinary person feel utterly despondent, became exhilarated like a madman. This was him, this was the Bat. A creature driven by obsession, pursuing a perverse sense of mental pleasure, crazier than any mentally ill person, the Bat.